Thank you, and good morning, everyone. We're very happy to have this distinguished panel here this morning, and looking forward to a good conversation. Also, if you have questions, keep them in your mind. We'll pass the mic in the end and invite you to engage in the conversation. So, today we're talking about AI and big data and leveraging it in digital pharma and therapeutics innovation. Let's first start with an introduction round with our panelists. Maybe we start from that end and we'll do introductions ourselves as well in the end. So we start from Ulrich, please.
That end. Okay, good morning. My name is Ulrich Muehlner. I'm here residing under GrowthCube Partners, which is my, let's say, company I started many years ago. But then my main job is I'm the CEO and co-founder of two digital health companies. One is an HCP patient platform. The other is a medically proven app company. And very much looking forward to the panel today.
Hello, I'm Tamara, Gerbert. My background's in neuroscience and AI. I used AI personally as well in computer vision and analyzing AI models in therapeutic solutions, and now founded Brightmind.AI, which is looking at personalized, effective, non-invasive brain stimulation.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. Christian Hein. Until last year, I was not too far from here on the Novartis campus, being responsible as Vice President of Digital Transformation and Innovation. Now I'm an independent executive advisor and board member. I'm representing today a company called Quant out of Israel that is able to predict clinical trial outcomes just with AI. So you just plug in, your trial design, and it spits out a Kaplan-Meier curve and a hazard ratio. So pleased to meet you all, and nice to be here.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Bracy Fertig, and I'm with Caresyntax Corporation. I started my career in medical research by training PhD biochemist, did a few years in investment banking, and then moved to Caresyntax to lead on strategy, fundraising, and M&A activities. Caresyntax is a business which is promoting the future of data-assisted surgery, bringing information about patients and data capture into the operating room to make surgery safer and smarter.
Angela Zubel. I am leading R&D at Debiopharm. I'm in charge of drug development in oncology field. Also, we're doing some anti-infectives. I spent almost 20 years in drug development at Novartis, Merck, and I started my career after finishing medical school in the hospital. And what we are doing, we are developing drug, but of course we are looking for new solutions, for innovations, how we could do drug development quicker, cheaper, and of course more patient-friendly.
And I don't even remember if I said my name in the beginning, so apologies. So I'm Tanja Dowe. I'm Managing Director at Angelini Ventures, a 300 million fund investing in biotech and digital health.
Thanks for coming, everyone. This is Baydar. I am the Chief Investment Officer for Eczacıbaşı, which is hard to pronounce, I know, but it means Chief Pharmacist in Turkish. It's a multinational conglomerate based in Turkey, but with presence across Europe and Middle East, where we operate in several different domains, from pharmaceutical manufacturing, so commercialization, radiopharmaceuticals, and digital health. And my mandate is basically overseeing all of our M&A and fund investments in healthcare. Thank you. So for the panelists, I guess, we have a lot to talk about in today's session. But obviously, from the perspective of, and for the sake of the name of the panel and the conference, the digital and health tech and investment, how do you see the investment from both from the companies and investors' perspective? I mean, what are companies and investors investing in at the moment? I would like to open up the discussions, and maybe we could start with Ulrich from your end and take your perspectives maybe. Thank you.
Sure. So I'm not an investor, obviously, at least not professionally, privately a bit. So I'm probably more providing it from the perspective of our digital health companies that I initially mentioned. So if I would say a trend is AI and data, I think this is stating the obvious. So probably I don't do this. So what we see is that you see a tremendous or at least significant shift towards real value generation, or kind of people asking for what is the value you're bringing to the table, so to say. So in our case, we have to really show, are we, for example, making the life of a patient or the life of a physician really easier, better, cheaper if needed, depending on whom you talk to. And also on the other side, the medically proven app sites, is there really a better outcome that you provide? So I think there's a shift towards, show me the data, show me the value. And this is, I think, a trend that I'm seeing, and probably much more so than compared to a few years ago.
So yeah, I completely agree with that. What we see at Brightmind is sort of a 3x improvement in reducing migraine days to existing solutions. I think if we weren't sort of drastically better in some form, shape or form, we probably wouldn't still be alive in these times. Also, I think sort of investing sort of as a company themselves, as sort of also Renee, our CEO, mentioned, if you don't leverage AI also in your day-to-day business, you are at a disadvantage. So I think as a company, we invest in our people to also have the tools and be equipped to be as effective as possible in their day-to-day as an investment in the people.
Yeah, so on my end, the hottest topic that I'm seeing right now, again, obviously AI, but AI applied to drug discovery and drug development. So it goes really all the way to pretty big financing rounds, up to 1 billion, several US companies that really do AI drug discovery end to end. We see a lot of AI tools being used that tackle specific steps in the drug discovery journey. And then obviously Quant Health, that I'm representing here, has raised more than $20 million, being able to really predict clinical trial outcomes purely based on AI. Why now? Because obviously AI has been around for a long time. This is not just the recent development of Gen AI that we've just heard the Microsoft lady talk about, but really right now, the compute power is finally catching up with the complexity of biology. We're going to see more evolutions in that space over the next 5 to 10 years, but so far we just weren't able to manage the huge complexity of everything that goes on a living cell in a computer. We're getting closer and closer to that point. We are already able to do that on a clinical trial, which is more regulated, but I believe we will have in the future foundation models to again really predict what is going on the biology level. So to me, the space is very exciting, and I believe we're going to be seeing big revolutions in the space over the next 5 to 10 years.
I'd love to talk about this question from two perspectives that I see in my particular role. So one of the things that I'm responsible for at Caresyntax is fundraising. So have access to investors who are reviewing our company. We recently raised a large round of funding. And as it relates to data and AI, when I think about what is resonating with investors, particularly for a later growth stage business like ours, is firstly applied AI. I think it's difficult to find a startup pitch deck nowadays that doesn't have some reference of AI. And I think that investors are discerning about where AI is truly being applied today in clinical practice, in drug discovery, for example, or in other applications within healthcare. And it means that those regulatory hurdles or those technological hurdles have been passed if you can see that this AI is being applied in practice today. The second axis that I would think about is the data piece, because, in many cases, and not all cases, my view is that some of the technology here is likely to become commoditized, particularly in the LLM space, likely sort of separate to healthcare, because healthcare, of course, has so much more complexity, particularly in drug discovery, as Christian mentioned. And then when you think about where the real value lies for an investor, for a company, I start to think about the data and the unique nature of the data, whether there is a moat around the ability to collect data, And that's something that we think about a lot at Caresyntax because we have these AI-powered medical devices that capture data in the operating room. And we are the only company that is able to leverage that data to deliver real-world evidence across the med device space in the way that the pharmaceutical industry has been leveraging real-world data for decades. There's just been no data capture in the OR to allow for that in the surgical segment. And so that's how I think about it from an investor investing into a technology business perspective. And the other axis that I would think about is how we as Caresyntax are investing our funds. And when we think about that, we actually think less about technology, about data, about AI, because we have a strong platform. And we think more about expansion and market share in the United States. And there's this unique market environment that exists today, which means that if you have a company which has access to the capital markets and has managed to grow despite headwinds in the healthcare segment, you can use M&A to capture market share in a pretty capital efficient manner, given the complexity of the customers that we're looking to sell into in the healthcare space, whether that be the pharma industry, the med tech industry, or the provider industry.
On our end at Debiopharm, we have investment fund. We're investing in small biotechs, really proposing digital solutions, innovative solutions. And what I'm doing in development piece, we are trying to implement them. Therefore, we have both sides. We are looking for companies which are proposing interesting, innovative solutions for drug development. And then we try already use them in our drug development process, and some of them are examples we discuss here and have heard a lot about data, real-world evidence data. We have, for example, clinical trial where we're proposing synthetic arm using really real-world evidence and data. This enable us to do a trial quicker and, of course, less costly. Maybe in the future, I really believe we could use maybe artificial patients, instead of really testing, for example, control arm and giving to the patients placebo without any efficiency. Yeah? But this is a little bit a future discussion, but those kind of things we're already trying, in our development. Of course, we are using all these apps which are enabling us to collect quicker data, that patients don't need maybe always to go to the center which conducting clinical trial, that we could have really online timely monitoring of safety adverse events. We are using some company solutions which are going into this direction in order really to monitor things, particularly in early development, if any kind of toxicities are occurring. Maybe we could see them a little bit earlier. Maybe we could do something before it became a really serious problem, DLT or grade 3-4 events. Therefore, we are looking at different things, data for sure. We are analyzing ourselves data, which we are generating, but also using them for artificial arm. But in terms of AI, for example, we're looking for biomarkers that, it's very important to identify patients who will benefit from the treatment. And here, I think it's a lot of space where we could use solutions proposed by AI. Just a few examples.
I have a follow-on question. I heard a lot about being able to sort of save money and time, but what has changed in this space in the past 5 years? We've gone through quite a cycle in investment and in sort of coming out of COVID, and then the financial markets have become quite much harder than it was 5 years ago. Maybe I'll point this follow-up question to Christian and then Angela as well. What's the difference? What are we investing in differently now than we invested in 5 years ago, especially in the pharma industry? You work from startup perspective with pharmas, and Angela works with startups from pharma perspective. Yeah.
So from a big pharma perspective, I think 5 years ago, everybody was looking much more into, the beyond the pill kind of solution. So anything that is, okay, you have a drug on the market, what can you do to complement that patient experience? I've seen a lot of companies now scale back on these investments because it is actually not that easy to demonstrate ROI. I still believe there is ROI, it is just not that easy to demonstrate in real life because there's for a number of reasons. So a lot of pharma companies are now saying, okay, what is my core business? My core business is discovering and developing new medicines. And this is getting more and more expensive by the year. So it's very clear that pharma right now has a very core focus. There's not a single pharma company that is not trying to make drug discovery or development more efficient, which makes them a little bit more open. They weren't that open. Clinical trials have been the most conservative business ever. But we now see finally some innovation, as you mentioned. Maybe we're even going to see innovation from a regulatory perspective, like synthetic control arms. So I see big move within pharma, from anything that's beyond the pill to, okay, let's fix the basics and let's make those better. So that is one of the key trends. And then obviously, I guess in the 2021 craze, we had a lot of tourist investors that probably really underestimated the complexity of healthcare. We're still probably paying a little bit for that. I think that is being a little bit weeded out right now in a lot of flat or down rounds. But I believe it's actually a good thing because healthcare is a very special industry, and I think you really need the expertise in the segment to be a good investor here.
And Angela, I know that Debiopharm also did some work with sort of digital companions a few years ago. Is that also are you coming closer to, when we work with startups, closer to the development?
Yes, we do. But the maybe main challenge with startups sometimes is that all these tools are just one idea or very, initial, very first draft. Therefore, in order to implement in clinical development, as Christian mentioned, it's very conservative one. It's not so easy because those things needs to be approved by health authorities. You cannot use whatever you want. And despite you think maybe it's a good idea, this is why we need to go through all these hurdles, to get all approvals possible. But we are getting there, like, for example, a simple thing like e-consent. At the beginning, it was always this paperwork, but now we have a solution to do that. Also to monitor some things like blood pressure, some symptoms we could capture using devices, and more devices are already validated by health authorities, and this is a good thing. But the challenge for the investment and small biotechs, they don't have validated tool, and how to get this issue solved. Therefore, as experimental thing, we still can, for a certain extent, use those things. But of course, if you want to go further from the maybe first in human small phase 1 trial to phase 2-3 or confirmatory trial, then of course you cannot use tool which is not validated, which is not give you then approval which you need. But we could still could experiment, and phase 1-2 trials still give us the rooms, and we are trying to do that. As I mentioned, we using digital biomarkers, and we could find things which we couldn't find, by using standard biomarker approach. This is why all these omics, radiomics, proteomics, whatever tools which small startups are offering, in some cases we see really a trend. We cannot say, okay, bingo, we found now magic biomarker, but I think tendency is clearly we can find population which could respond to our drug versus if we use a classical way of looking at biomarker. I think this has a lot of future, and as you all know, all investment on a cost side is important to understand who will respond really on your drug, and not to treat 80% of population like it was big halo on all these blockbusters, but at the end only 20-30% really benefit from treatment. And this what is to me crucial, and I think this will be the way to understand who really responds to your drug. And this will be $1 million question, maybe many $1 million question in the future.
So there's a lot of hope for these biomarkers helping us understand who responds. But you also brought up, Angela, some sort of challenges about needing really validated systems, and maybe I'll kind of toss that then forward in this row. In general, what are the challenges in leveraging big data and AI? What makes it difficult for all of you in your everyday life? Let's move from to Bracy and then forward that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at Caresyntax, we are less involved with the biopharma industry and much more involved with the medtech and the provider segment of the healthcare market. And the challenge that we face in med devices and anything that comes out of the operating room is that there really just is no data. Because if you think about what an operating room looks like today, it's a lot of hardware. It's a very physical environment. You might have some software related to an endoscope feed or an intuitive surgical robot, but generally speaking, these devices aren't connected, and the decisions are being made, a lot of decisions, a lot of mental strain is being made by a surgeon, by a nursing team, and by the sort of ancillary hospital care teams that surround the operating room. And so what we've looked to implement at Caresyntax is a system whereby you can comprehensively from end to end connect all of the devices in the operating room, add video-based data capture, add audio, add IoT sensors to all of the devices, and create a sort of centralized control panel whereby these care teams not only can manage everything that's happening in real time intraoperatively, but also so that for the first time we can collect this comprehensive data set on every patient, every surgeon, every surgery, every device. Every time the door opens to the operating room, we can collect that piece of data. And we are doing that, but we're rolling this out. We're in about 3,000 operating rooms today, and there are a lot more than that need to be equipped with this type of technology. The challenge then becomes, once you have this data source, firstly, you have to link it up to the other parameters that matter. So what actually happens to patients after they have this experience upon which we collect data in the operating room. That means ingesting electronic health record data. It means patient engagement solutions to collect patient-reported outcome measurements. As we all know, health data is unstructured, and so getting this into a usable format from all of these different sources is a major challenge. If you can overcome that challenge and you can deliver the right insight, the medtech industry doesn't always know what to do with it because they haven't had these insights before. And so that insight has to be so compelling, not only from a clinical perspective, but also from an operational, from a financial perspective for the providers, for that to be used as real-world evidence to really move the needle for a medtech customer in our case to better provide their solutions to the market and shift this paradigm where really, and excuse me for saying it, but the med devices that do the best are the ones that have the sales reps with the best relationships with the doctors who use the products. And we're trying to shift that paradigm such that actually we're looking at the most cost-effective, the most clinically effective, and the best products for the patients who are receiving them.
Yeah, so on my end, I actually see 4 big challenges, and I could probably go longer than that. First, healthcare data is dirty, usually. We've just heard in the Microsoft talk earlier today, 2% of data that's generated in the hospital is actually usable. Not very surprised by that, because even within pharma, we generate data with a very specific purpose. This data is usually then packaged, sent over to FDA or EMEA for approval. And then it sits on the shelf somewhere, and usually we don't use it that much anymore. We actually identified that as a problem 5 years ago at Novartis and created a project called Data 42, an entire team doing nothing but making that data that was generated once reusable and cleaner. So there's a big just making sure that data is being usable in the right format. As we heard from Microsoft again, GenAI may help with that, but even that takes a bit because you want to make sure hallucinations are being covered. Next one is data is fragmented. Data sits in I don't know how many different systems, and just combining them to make big data more usable is also pretty challenging. So at Quant, a lot of what we did was just making sure that the different data sets are being built into one or secret source of a big knowledge graph. I can tell you that was a lot of 3 years of hard work to just combine the data points into something that is actually now really meaningful. Number 3 is even if you have on top of that, if you are able to combine these different fragmented data, then you come into all the problems of privacy. And obviously that is something we want to make sure that our data is being used in a responsible way. But sometimes current privacy rules can also be a little bit of an overkill and stops us from using that. And privacy is, to bring to the fourth point, just one of the many regulations that you need to cope with. I mean, already right now in AI, there seems to be a new AI regulation popping up every month. So we obviously have very famously in the European Union the AI Act, but even in the US you had Biden's executive order. California is now close to passing a big legislation, and there is pretty much every other government that is trying to figure out what to do with this kind of regulation. And obviously that is on top of all the regular regulation that you already know well, like the MDR and all the other kind of FDA regulations. So taking those 4 points together means it's really complex leveraging that, and it's not just, okay, throw it all in one big model and that spits out something nice.
Yeah, so from a startup perspective, I think sort of similar to what Bracy was saying, right? You often have sort of a technology push where you think, okay, you have a bit higher accuracy and just develop something great, but really in that healthcare system, you're not actually making the healthcare practitioners' lives easier. So I think that's something that's underestimated. Also, I think in early stage startups, so from that perspective, there are a lot of people that don't sit on big data. So often it's underestimated how long it takes until you can really use more sophisticated AI models if you're really working with biological data and building up the database. So often I think I've seen in my last startup and now, one should be working more with data engineers initially and setting up that pipeline, and that's underestimated, and one maybe tends to hire AI engineers too early. And then in the sort of AI and therapeutic space, if one doesn't look at low-hanging fruits of sort of more exploratory things such as drug discovery, but really applying AI in therapy itself, we're looking at more high-risk applications where you really don't want to make any mistakes. So you have startups that are really spending a bulk amount of the work going from a 99.9 accuracy to a 99.998 accuracy. So when you go into those sort of more high-risk applications where there's really immense potential, you really want to understand, okay, what are the surprise elements? And there I think AI as a technology has to work more on really understanding how the technology works and improving our understandable AI. I think explainable AI is still sort of in its infancy to be able to, for us to also really understand what the surprise elements are and to do our best job.
Yeah, I was listening actually to some of the statements, or actually all of the statements, and some actually triggered a little bit Groundhog Day moment to me, because when I'm listening to Angela when she was mentioning omics, I was saying, yeah, omics started when I did my PhD roughly, so you can now guess how old I am. And it was a big hope, omics, we do omics, a lot of, chips, all of this will cure everything, pharma will become much more efficient. De facto, nothing happened. If you look at the costs, to bring a drug to market has skyrocketed since then, despite all those technologies where we had big hopes. So what I'm saying is I'm hope, and I'm not fearing that we sit 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and look back at today's panel, where we all have had this kind of hope and data and all of these topics, and we look back and say, drug costs have again increased by 50% and no better outcomes, healthcare costs have increased. So what I'm trying to say is that we have seen these waves of excitement and technology many, many times. We have in Basel 2 pharma companies, major pharma companies, one of which, I don't name the one I'm referring to, has made a big fuss about personalized medicine. They have 2 divisions, one diagnostics, one pharma, and the investor story was that those divisions work closely together to bring personalized medicines to market. I think hardly anything happened, besides Herceptin maybe. So what I'm trying to say is we have to probably distinguish between marketing buzz and hype and the reality on the ground. And reality on the ground, at least the reality I'm dealing with every day, is health IT or IT people from hospitals who are very old school. They are dealing with legacy IT systems. They have 30, 40 systems in their hospital. And I come with fantastic ideas. I come with AI, big data, and I look in their eyes and I realize, okay, we are talking here 2 different, not even stories, we are probably talking 2 different worlds. So what I'm trying to say is that all of those ideas, which I fundamentally subscribe to, and I'm a big believer in technology, a big believer in AI and data, but we have to bring them to the ground, we have to bring them to the reality of the daily work of the people, and only then they will have an impact on patients. And some of the points Christian made are very important, like data quality, data fragmentation, regulatory standards, although they are boring and they are probably in the way, but we have to really adhere to them, implement them to make them happen. I think another point that has probably not been mentioned, and again is close to my heart, is think about workflow integration. So how is a new technology really coming into the daily workflow of a physician, of a nurse, of a patient, of whoever is involved in the healthcare system? Because any technology that is cool on the surface but doesn't make it to the daily life of a practicing physician, again in my world, is not making an impact. It will be nice on an investor presentation, it will be nice at a whatever kind of glamorous conference, but we have to bring the stuff really to the patients and to the physicians, and this is sometimes very boring work. For example, our company is dealing now with the German system, the gematik, the telematic infrastructure. For those of you who come from Germany, you know what I'm talking about. Very boring stuff, not something you can really talk about at a cocktail party, but this is the daily life of the German healthcare system, to bring digital technology to the patients on a broader scale. And what I'm trying to advocate for is that we also should look at this dimension much more than just, let's say, fancy words that at the end of the day won't make an impact at the patient level.
Very good. Thank you. I guess, we've had a very good conversation so far in terms of understanding both the challenges and the sort of the so-called the use cases of applying AI. I took a couple notes about drug discovery, omics, operating rooms, which have less of data, but a lot of data at the same time, and clinical trials as well. I mean, if you look at it from a broader perspective of healthcare, there are lots of things converging to the sort of, the same needs, unmet needs, as well as the usage of technology, the potential usage of technology still needed to be seen, hopefully. And that's for now, and that's for the future, that's for the past that we discussed a bit. So maybe I would like to turn our attention to the future within the next 24 months, let's say. And if we keep these dynamics in mind, what is the secret sauce to succeed? Meaning, what are the differentiation points to drive innovation? Again, if you are a startup or an investment company to invest in something, a promising startup, to stay ahead of the curve or ahead of the innovation and investment. So from your perspectives, again, I mean, when you are driving the innovation, when you're working on a new product or a service, or when you're investing into a new venture, what are the key ingredients that you would be keen on seeing? Maybe I can start with Angela, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. In the future, I think what is important, my observation, is timing. Because a lot of companies, startup, they have super fancy idea, and to your point, but if the infrastructure is not ready and system is not ready and people are not ready to incorporate this idea, then this idea will die, because it's no ground for grow, I would say. Yeah, this is why timing is very important. A lot of those ideas, fancy things people have, they're dying because you cannot pragmatically use this solution. We are not ready yet. Yeah, this is why a little bit startups need to think around about pragmatic side as well. And this is what we are doing at Debiopharm. We're helping them. They're coming with idea to do pilots. To really try to implement in the clinic, that they see where are the challenges. Sometimes they have no clue about drug development. They have good idea. Indeed, we can use it, but in order to use it, you need to do a lot of efforts, and we, on our side, need to spend a lot of time, money, and resources. And this, of course, not helping us. Therefore, we are balancing a little bit, because we need to also see value. I think the successful thing needs to provide value to the company, to drug developer. If your tool, you convince, will be providing some savings in terms of resources, in terms of time, or money, I'm sure you have a good chances that this solution will be implemented or taken into account by drug developer. If this is just providing you additional burden, I need to spend my additional time, I need even to help you to develop thing, then of course it will be difficult. Who wants to be involved in such process? We are doing that because we are on both sides. We are investing and we are helping, those startups to develop a company and to see real world, real evidence, because sometimes they are just dreaming, But if they want to be successful, they need to think which kind of value they are bringing for drug developers.
Thank you. Bracy?
So Angela mentioned timing and pragmatism there, and I would like to use this time to provide a bit of a pragmatic answer myself, because if I think about what our secret sauce is at Caresyntax, I've mentioned it in my previous answers, I think that it's unique, defensible, moated, if that's a word, data around the operating room. And you can't collect that data unless you fundamentally have a product that the users and the decision makers in a hospital love and use every single day. And that is not an easy thing to build. It's not an easy thing to get into an operating room. We've had products in operating rooms for over a decade, and we've made missteps over the course of our company's existence as it relates to creating these products that the surgeons, for example, love to use. I'll give you an example in that, one of our first AI applications in our product was a system which rated surgeons' skill levels. And you can imagine the surgeons did not love that. And we still have that capability, but we don't use it because the surgeons don't like it. And what we do now is we use AI on top of our platform to do things like provide turn-by-turn guidance. So if you have a surgeon who's operating with traveling nurses, which happens a lot in Europe in particular, given the nursing shortages, they don't know the surgeon's preferences. They don't know when the scalpel should be handed to them because it's that phase of the operation. And our technology combined with these data acquisition engines allow for that to pop up on a screen and the surgeon to be handed the scalpel when they need it, the right devices to be in the room for any given surgery based on their preferences. And that makes the surgeons' lives and the nurses' lives easier. But that's not the whole story. You also need to improve, I guess our sort of North Star is really three things. It's clinical, it's operational, and it's financial metrics. If you can link up all three of those things in a single product, then your decision makers are going to love it because often they're focused on the financials, let's be honest. But the surgeons, the care teams, the nurses, the hospital administrators, the OR schedulers are also going to love the product. And only when you fundamentally have that can you collect the differentiated data that, in my view, is a huge driver of the value of Caresyntax. And the truth is that we're just now scratching the surface of what we can do with that data across both applications within the operating room, but also across the use of this data to drive improvements in the medtech industry, to drive the future of value-based care, to drive automation within the operating room, to drive patient safety. But without that fundamental product, it's impossible. If you think about Google, for example, Google has a great ad business because they collect so much data on their users, but that would be impossible if they also didn't have the best search engine that exists. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so 2 points to add from my side. The first one was, I think now mentioned by four of my co-panelists, that is the same thing that I actually mentor the startups that I'm working with when they want to partner with pharma, is thinking about the workflow integration. How do you really embed yourself into the pharma systems? And that is even harder in drug discovery and development, given that there is no dominant platform. On the commercial side, it's pretty easy. Viva has the dominating market share. But on drug discovery and development, there is no one platform. It's mostly homegrown and a lot of stuff developed by consultants. So what do you embed with? But still, you need to think about this. How do you become part of a regular pharma workflow? And the other point I just want to also just make is right now the secret sauce is just be very much on top of what's happening with AI. This is now the third big platform shift I'm seeing. The first one is like the internet revolution back in the early 2000s, then the mobile transition in 2008. It feels like now we're 2 years into this AI craze. People are starting to ask, like, where's my money? And obviously right now we haven't seen a lot yet, but it's like back in 2001 if you were asking, do I need to be on the internet as a company, or in 2008, do I need a mobile website? Obviously right now it's pretty clear that these transitions have happened and you need to be part of that. And what is even more amazing right now in AI, the model development right now, as Satya from Microsoft said on the slide, is non-linear. So the number of new models coming out every week and the number of improvements there is just so amazing that we're really at the beginning of something where we really don't know where it's going. All we know is this is going to be big. So even if you don't necessarily see a lot of day-to-day impact right now, I would be very surprised if we're sitting here in 2000, let's say 34, and wouldn't see a major paradigm shift on pretty much everything we're doing in healthcare.
So personally, I'm really passionate about driving innovation. In neuroscience, most neurological applications don't have sort of solutions that really work, right? So in what we're doing with brain stimulation, we've now stumbled upon a protocol that happens to be much better for migraine, but we've stumbled upon it, right? What I think is key for driving innovation in the future is to with the brain recordings that we're recording, to really understand the brain much better and then be able to optimize it in real time. So what's exciting about brain stimulation is that we can directly influence when we record. And that's sort of a very unexplored territory. And here AI is really exciting. So compared to sort of natural languages where we're just using AI sort of in an interface, what's exciting about using AI in protein sequences for drug discovery or in brain data is that we're actually using data that is non-intuitive to humans, right, such as protein sequences, and then using that to understand the syntax, to understand viral escape. And similarly for brain data, we are using AI, and when they're understanding patterns, that's actually furthering our knowledge. So I think the secret sauce is to use it to improve our knowledge and therefore improve therapy.
So I think visions are indeed important. So I think we are in an industry that you know has really major shifts from vaccines, from gene therapy to now AI, based on, you know, bold brains with big visions. So I think this is key. But then I think the next big step is, or next big question is, how to get those things really on the ground. And this is, I think, the key questions why I think some of the technologies in the past didn't have this impact or did not get the impact in time that we were all hoping for. So I think the key question, at least for those of us who are more in the daily works to get this implemented, is to translate these big ideas, this big vision, the reality of, let's say, a hospital somewhere in, I don't know, in Basel-Land, so to say, and translate this, what is possible, into their daily life. Of course, explain the advantages, the value, efficiency gains, and so forth. I think we have mentioned this a few times here on the panel, but also understand what are the barriers, the resistances. Why are people not yet jumping on this new thing? It can be thousands of things, because they are implementing a new hospital information system which keeps them busy for the next 3 years, and you come with a new technology and they say, yeah, good idea, but come back in 3 years. So what I'm trying to say is that I think timing was also mentioned. There's a tremendous timing aspect, and I think it's our job to understand, you know, when is the right time for your particular, let's say, technology, for your AI-driven offering or big data-driven offering. For sure, there's a need for that. Maybe not everywhere, each of the time, but somewhere already you see nuggets where this is coming, and then you have to go deep, implement it, show the value, have a showcase that you can shop around. But I'm really advocating for, you know, as I said earlier, for the boring stuff, and sometimes the boring stuff brings the biggest value, even in our glorious industry.
Great. So really, I think as a sort of summary of this round, you know, within the next 24 months, what is the secret sauce? So yes, you must use AI, whether it's generative or an analytical AI. For that, you need the data, importance of data. But in the end, you have to offer pragmatic solutions to existing workflows and at the right time. Is that somehow fairly summarized? Is there any audience questions?
Hi, Gerbert Sandy from Basel. I was very struck that all of you, in your own way, were talking about value assessment of digital health technologies, short term or new term. So I'm curious, value assessment of digital health technologies have been published in the last 2 years. There are 2 very large European HTA health technology assessment initiatives doing. And I'm curious, are these on your radar? Would tools like this actually help answer the questions all of you have raised?
Thank you. Maybe I will take this one. What is important, I would say, not this big, numbers, how much the technology could bring overall to the healthcare system and overall theoretical to the drug development. What is for us important, I have clinical trial very clearly with my classical, standard timelines and costs and FTE, and you are proposing your solution. What does it mean for this trial? Could I do it quicker? Could I do it cheaper? Or it's enable me to capture maybe some adverse events or brings value which I cannot do with standard methods or not so good? This kind of thing. If I see, okay, this makes sense, let's do that. But if you're telling me, okay, overall, it's those technologies providing a lot of value, for me as a drug developer, I have my budget, I have my timelines, I have my resources, and I need to understand you coming with something, what this bring concrete for me without all these papers. Of course, we read all of those. If not, we would not invest at all in this segment. Yeah, of course, I believe truly that overall this is a good idea and they bring value after some time and years. But what is important to convince also upper management, people who are responsible for the budget, investors, if this makes sense. If I have this kind of, real evaluation from startup coming and telling, okay, guys, you could save this, or you could have super innovative solution, you can do this quicker, whatever thing my trial could benefit, I would say it's much easier to sell it also for internal boards.
Thank you very much to the panelists. I just like to extend Ulrich's argument. So I started working in industry when combinatorial chemistry was a big hype. So I'm probably even older than you. And over the last 30 years, technologies made quantum leaps, but productivity in the pharma industry is decreasing. So I'm just wondering, aren't we focusing on the wrong topic? Because organization innovation could be probably cheaper and deliver improved productivity. So what about using all these new technologies in order to monitor and better understand how organization make decision and work? Because I have the feeling that we are in a bit of a Peter Pan syndrome right now.
Who wants to take the question?
I'm happy to give it a go. I mean, the question is actually, what is the root cause of why treatments are getting more expensive, right? And there's a number of hypotheses around that. A lot of it is actually that, most of the mainstay problems that were easy druggable targets have now been drugged. So that's why we see all the Me Too. So number one, we're getting to harder and harder challenges. So will that, what you're proposing, actually fix that problem? Partially, yes. And by the way, I'm very aligned with you with regards to maybe suboptimal decision making in big organizations. Number two is also obviously ever increasing, regulatory complexity and ever increasing trial sizes, etc. So these things, I also don't think we're going to make them go away, right? So I just think that you can optimize every single one of those steps a little bit more, but I'm not seeing, something that is just going to say, okay, now we are going to switch everything to a completely new technology and going to do it in a totally different way. Or maybe some of the new AI startups like Zaira and others who've raised $1 billion in the US are just going to turn pharma completely, flip it to the other side. I don't see that happening yet. I'm still thinking, there's a real big shift happening right now up to phase 2. I wouldn't be surprised if after phase 2 we still see, pharma picking over a lot of that innovation anyhow.
Maybe just from my side, I would like to add, first of all, indeed, this is interesting phenomenon. I tried to answer myself what's going on. Of course, drugs are much more complex. If you're looking at ADCs, all these antibodies, all these radioconjugates, CAR T-cell therapies, this is enormous complex things which are very expensive. This is one piece of, I think, cost. It's much expensive than small molecules development. I'm talking about oncology. Yeah. Then, in terms of digital solutions, is still we need to first invest, and later on will come some return. This also not sinking cost those things immediately. Yeah? And unfortunately, regulators not always helping us. And if you are doing clinical trials now, EMA coming with these AVDR, requests for biomarker-driven trials, believe me, we look at this, it's incredible. We need to increase cost for 1 million in order to be compliant with this new regulation. It takes 1 year longer. And who will do clinical trials in Europe? We already addressed, I was coming from ESMO, this question was raised to regulators during the Congress in oncology, because guys, if you will do like that, I will think twice if I will do my clinical trial here in Europe. I will go to the country where I don't have those regulations, and why I need to have them if I am doing phase 1, I'm hypothetically testing biomarker, which compound probably will die. As you know, 9 out of 10 compounds will dying in between. Why should I spend 1 million more? And with a small-sized company like myself, it's really a big question. Yeah. This is just my thoughts around your point. Thank you.
But maybe to add, it's a topic for a new panel that you're raising. So that's why it's interesting, and it's also a topic close to my heart because I spent quite some time in this space on different roles. But I think you're raising an interesting point because I think we are trying to solve the problem of pharma R&D more or less always in the same way, using technology, which is not wrong fundamentally. I'm also a big believer in technology, biochemist by training, by the way. But I think we are not enough looking at other levers or reasons why we are inefficient. And I think you mentioned a few like organizational issues. For example, in my view, there's a lack of learning in the organizations because you're doing something in a certain space and not successful and you dismantle it. All the knowledge is gone. I think Christian mentioned one of the initiatives also aware of. And you wipe out hundreds of millions of investments, sometimes even more, without distilling or synthesizing the learning out of it. And this goes over and over and over again. This is, I think, one reason. The other reason is that you have a disconnect between the timelines that, the decision makers who make a decision today are not accountable for the outcome 5 or 10 years later because they won't be in their seats anymore, in their chairs anymore. A CEO has a lifetime of, not a personal lifetime, but a lifetime as a CEO is, let's say, 5 years on average. So if he or she makes a big decision now, it's very unlikely he or she will be accountable for that down the road. So what I'm trying to say is you have a fundamental also disconnect and issue in the system itself, which you cannot cure and treat by technology itself or purely by technology. And I think therefore it's a very important question, but again, a question probably beyond this panel, but a worse one to discuss.
Certainly, this really requires a whole other hour of discussion, big question. But I do see that our screen tells us that we're over time. So I would like to thank the audience and the panelists for a very good conversation. It was interesting to hear both the medtech and pharma perspectives and hospital operating rooms perspectives in one panel. So thank you so much for the good conversation.
Thanks for joining. I guess, I hope it was fruitful. It was a fruitful discussion for all of us for today. I would like to thank the panelists for joining us. Thank you.